The wedding venue was breathtaking, adorned with cascading white flowers and golden accents, exuding elegance and joy. Guests filled the room, their laughter and excited chatter blending harmoniously with the soft melody of the string quartet. The air carried the scent of fresh roses and the warm aroma of the carefully prepared feast awaiting the celebration. Today was meant to be the happiest day of Emily's life, a day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. Yet, standing at the altar, her fingers intertwined with Daniel's, an eerie silence replaced the joyous atmosphere, as a voice cut through the air like a dagger. "Stop this wedding!" Gasps rippled through the crowd, and all eyes turned toward the source of the interruption. It was Margaret, Daniel's mother, her face set in a stormy expression, her piercing gaze locked onto Emily. The elegant woman, known for her poise and composure, was now the center of attention for all the reasons. The officiant hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he held the wedding book. Emily's heart pounded so loudly in her chest that she could barely hear anything else. A murmur swept through the room as Margaret took a step forward, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor, amplifying the tension. "This wedding cannot go on," she declared, her voice firm yet filled with unmistakable emotion, "because the bride is carrying another man's child." The words sent shockwaves through the crowd. Gasps, whispers, and stunned expressions filled the room. Emily felt as if the ground beneath her had vanished. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Daniel's grip on her hand loosened, and she turned to him, her eyes pleading for him to believe in her. But his face was unreadable, his jaw clenched tightly, eyes dark with emotion. The accusation hung in the air like a thick, choking fog. Friends and family exchanged bewildered glances, while some shook their heads in disbelief. This was supposed to be a moment of celebration, a day filled with love and happiness. Instead, it had turned into a public spectacle of humiliation. Margaret continued, her voice unwavering. "I have proof," she announced, pulling out an envelope from her handbag. "This isn't just speculation. I had my suspicions, so I took matters into my own hands." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Proof?" she whispered, barely able to find her voice. "What proof?" Margaret handed the envelope to Daniel, who hesitated before accepting it. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out the papers inside. The room fell into a heavy silence as his eyes scanned the contents, his expression shifting from shock to confusion. Emily's mind raced. This had to be a mistake, a cruel misunderstanding. There was no way she could be pregnant by another man, because she wasn't pregnant at all. Her hands balled into fists as she found the courage to speak. "Daniel, I swear, whatever is in there is a lie. I have never—" Margaret cut her off, her voice cold. "Don't deny it, Emily. The evidence speaks for itself." The crowd leaned in, waiting for Daniel's reaction. His face was unreadable as he folded the paper and turned toward his mother. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice tight. Margaret squared her shoulders. "I had a private investigator look into Emily. I needed to protect you, Daniel. I couldn't let you marry someone who might betray you." Emily felt her legs weaken, barely able to keep herself upright. This was madness. A private investigator. Why would Margaret go to such lengths? What did she even find? "Let me see that," Emily demanded, reaching for the paper. Daniel hesitated but handed it over. Emily's eyes darted across the page, her breath quickening, but as she read, confusion deepened on her face. The document claimed she had visited a clinic, a pregnancy clinic, just weeks ago. Her heart pounded in her chest. This isn't true," she stammered, looking up at Daniel. "I never went to this clinic. I don't know how." Margaret scoffed. Are you saying someone fabricated an entire report? Emily swallowed hard. That was exactly what she was saying. But who would go to such lengths? And why? Daniel looked at her, his eyes searching hers. Looking for any hint of deception, Emily willed him to see the truth, to believe in her. I love you, Daniel, she whispered. I would never do this to you. The room remained eerily silent as everyone waited for Daniel's response. Then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, a voice from the back of the room broke through the tension. I think I can explain, the voice said. All heads turned toward the entrance, and Emily's breath hitched in her throat because standing there, holding a second envelope, was someone she never expected to see on this day. The truth was about to come out, and no one was ready for what it would reveal. The figure stepped forward, revealing themselves to be Sarah, Emily's best friend since childhood. Her face was flushed, her expression torn between urgency and fear. She held up the second envelope, gripping it tightly as though it contained the answer to everything. Margaret's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting anyone to challenge her claim. I know what's in that envelope, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. And I also know who planted it. The entire room stiffened. Emily felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Margaret scoffed. You're bluffing, she said. How could you possibly know that? Sarah took another step forward. Because I was there when the false records were created, and I know exactly who is behind this setup. Daniel turned towards Sarah, his face tense with uncertainty. Who? He demanded. Who would do something like this? Sarah hesitated for just a moment before speaking the name that sent shockwaves through the room. Margaret, she said, locking eyes with Daniel's mother. It was you. A stunned silence fell over the guests, and all eyes turned to Margaret. The mother-in-law's face paled, and for the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across her features. Emily barely dared to breathe. The truth had begun to unravel, but the battle for justice had only just begun. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. Daniel, his face tight with betrayal, turned to his mother. Tell me she's lying, he said, his voice breaking slightly. But Margaret couldn't meet his eyes. Sarah stepped closer. I have the real documents, she said, handing them to Daniel. He took them with trembling hands and read through them. His expression darkened. These show Emily was never at that clinic, he murmured. Margaret's silence spoke louder than any confession. With every guest watching, she finally sighed, her shoulders slumping. I only wanted to protect you, she whispered. Daniel took a deep breath before turning to Emily. I believe you, he said firmly, taking her hands once more. A wave of relief washed over Emily. The wedding was back on, and justice had prevailed. Margaret, exposed and ashamed, walked out quietly, and as Emily and Daniel exchanged vows, they knew their love had conquered deceit, proving that trust and truth would always win.